Naming convention, as I mentioned at the very start, is really important. And naming things is hard. There's actually a computer science joke. There's two hard things in computer science: cache invalidation and naming things. And I believe that to be true. Pretty much every server-side language has coding guidelines, how to name your classes. In fact, Java kind of has a running joke about the abstract factory, like things like that, where if you say abstract factory, a Java developer knows what it does because of the naming convention. They know, well, guess what? That's going to be an uppercase A, that's going to be an uppercase F. There's no underscores, there's no hyphens. They, like, just in their head, if you say those two words, they know what it's going to look like in their code. But CSS has never really had this. JavaScript actually for a long time didn't have this, but we've seen a lot of consistency around things. You know, if you see something that is a function that has an underscore at the beginning of it, you probably know it's private. It's not something that we're supposed to be using outside the context of wherever it was defined. And so these naming conventions help clarify intent. So when we're looking at the CSS that we're writing, how do we clarify our intent? How do we explain what it is that we're trying to do? How do we, write things as a way of grouping things together or keeping them separate from other things? So now base styles, well, it's easy. They're just element selectors, so there's really nothing to it. We have element selectors. Simple, super simple. So naming them, not a problem. We may have some pseudo class selectors, but these are, again, we're trying to define what styles apply to everything across the board. And we don't want to be heavy-handed in the base styles that we want to write. We have layout, and so we saw a little bit of the naming convention earlier. So yes, I could do like .header, I could do .sidebar or .content, but it's hard to differentiate the fact that these are layout classes and are different than the modules. And oops, it's a pretty easy problem to solve. We just attach layout prefix before them. So layout header, layout sidebar, layout content, each of these identifying these things as layout. They're all kind of belonging together. They're all doing the same thing. These are the containers that we're going to put stuff into. So use class over ID. Look at that. We just touched on that subject. And the reason is because specificity can be dangerous. So I'll go through the specificity chart. There's really only 4 categories, so not that complex. Most of you are probably fairly familiar with this. And on the right side, we have element selectors. So those are our base selectors. We know that. On the other side, we have inline styles, and we pretty much know never to use those, except in very extreme cases. And I recognize there are exceptions to every rule. But for the most part, we are avoiding inline styles. So that leaves us with essentially 2 categories. We have class selectors or ID selectors. So going through a bit of an example, we have links. These links happen to be blue with a tint of green in them. I actually like this color. This was like my favorite link color for a long time, 039. But you can imagine, like in this design, I might have a sidebar where I don't want the links in my sidebar to stand out. I really want people kind of focused on the content area. So I want this subdued link style for links on the right-hand side that are just going to be gray. They kind of blend in. So people are focused on the main content. But I have this form. And on this form, I only have a single cancel link. This might be tied into some JavaScript that has to like reset some state before redirecting the user off to somewhere else. There may be a, are you sure you want to do this before we leave? But there's only ever one cancel link on the page, so I say it's an ID, #cancel, and it's going to be red. Excellent. So I've got my links, those are blue. I've got my subdued links, those are gray. And I have my cancel links, those are red. Super simple. but as clients can often be, they say, you know what, I have this one particular page, however, where that cancel link is red, but it kind of distracts, and I really need them to complete this form. This is kind of an important form for them to complete. So can we actually make this cancel link subdued? Can we make it gray so it doesn't stand out as much? It's like the unsubscribe links in emails. Can you find it? No, because they make it blend in. So in this particular case, we're going to try to make this link blend in. So we're going to give it a class of subdued. Excellent. I'm not even going to look at the design. I'm going to ship it off, and sure enough, the client comes back and says, hey, my link's still red. Right? Specificity says that that ID of cancel will outrank that class of subdued, and my links are still red when they're supposed to be gray. Well, you know, on Monday I might take the challenge, but on Friday, bang, important all the things, boom, I'm done. I'm going home. Look at this, right? This works. I can do this. I'm done for the day. I can move on to the next problem. Until maybe the next time I need to override subdued in some way, and suddenly I'm doing bang important again. So some other ways we could solve this problem. You know, so as great as the bang important is for busting specificity, I want to try to avoid it. So here's another way we can do this. I can double up on my selectors. I can do #cancel.subdued. So any subdued cancel link will be gray. Now, due to specificity rules, an ID and class selector will beat just an ID selector. So this wins. Again, I could say I'm done and move on. But if you kind of examine what's actually happening here, what's happening here is that I've created two styles and I've applied them to the same element. When in reality, I only want one of them. I didn't want the other one. And yet I've specified that it should be this thing. So instead, I can simplify my CSS and have a subdued class and a cancel class, and only apply one or the other on that particular element. So the thing that had to change here in order for this to work was in the HTML, yes, I had that ID of cancel. JavaScript might still need to get access to this element. It may still need to unset those things. It might need to put that modal dialog, are you sure you want to leave? But from a CSS perspective, I don't care about the ID. I care about the way it looks. So the CSS cares about the class. And in this case, I've got a single class that's being applied here. And now you'll notice that I haven't had to write other CSS to undo the CSS that I've written here. Right? So this is that ability to isolate things and only write CSS once. I'm not having to write more CSS than I need to. Now from a naming convention, maybe I want to be a little bit more specific in indicating that these two styles, subdued and maybe instead of cancel, I want to call it danger, because maybe I want to use danger in places that might not be specific to canceling. Maybe it's for, you know, read our terms and services, and it's in red to stand out so people actually read the 30 pages of terms and services that people like to have. So that naming convention indicating that these things are kind of grouped together, that they belong together, and that I might want to apply one or the other, not both on the same thing. Now, if you're using third-party systems like grid systems, like 960GS or whatever, a lot of them have their own naming convention, and I recognize that that's okay. Like, I don't necessarily suggest that you fork every single third-party library so that they all use your naming convention. It's okay when you're using other people's code. Again, it's just really you know, recognizing, okay, this is layout. It may have its own naming convention. It's not necessary to go over and rewrite all of their CSS so that it matches your standards. Now, a lot of grid systems, especially using preprocessors, use like placeholder syntaxes and whatnot, or use mix-ins that allow you to specify your own naming convention, and that's cool. But it's not necessary to necessarily go back and change all those things. Again, just recognizing the role that it's serving here. Yes?
I found a simple solution in SACSS is you just create your own naming convention and you extend these things right into them. And so then you could use the Bootstrap grid system using an L dash by just simply extending it in.
That's exactly true. So, a lot of grid systems like the ones in Bootstrap allow you to extend them so that you can use your own naming convention. So, very cool. Yes?
I got a question from the chat. What about making separate less files for the different pieces like layout? Then you won't need prefixes.
So when it comes to breaking up our CSS into individual files, generally speaking, each module should be in its own file. Layout-wise, I usually don't have enough classes that I would start to break them out. What I will do, though, is have my grid system in one file and all my other layout classes in another file. So I will have like a layout.less or layout.scss that is my layout header or my layout content or my layout constrained, all my different layout classes. And then I will have my grid.scss or grid.less that has my grid system in there. And then from there, that I will have my modules and so on. I'll touch a little bit on naming convention of sort of file naming, also file structure later on in the day.